Bom dia, boa tarde, boa noite, or whatever the case may be. My name is Marcus, and I am the host of the Black Brazil Today YouTube channel, as well as the blackbraziltoday.com blog, where I analyze Brazil from the perspective of race. So today, I want to talk a little bit about something that I have to talk about occasionally. It's another one of the topics that I've covered frequently on the Black Brazil Today blog. And this has to do with the persecution of religions of African origin in Brazil. Now, when I first became aware of the religion that they call Candomblé, and to a lesser extent, Umbanda, back when I first started studying about Brazil in 2000, I really didn't know, how these religions were seen and the experiences of people who follow these particular religions in Brazil. But you can't really get into the study of the Black experience in Brazil without understanding how adherents to these religions, how they get treated, how these religions are demonized. People suffer physical attacks. They suffer, vandalism against their houses of worship, what they call tijeros. We've seen people vandalize symbols of the orishas, which are the deities that are, that are part of the religions. And the more I studied into this, I'm like, man, what is this all about? And it just fits perfectly into, as I've said, when I talk about Brazil, it's from the perspective of race. And for years, these type of attacks were just labeled as religious intolerance, which it is. But as of late, more and more Afro-Brazilian leaders are calling it for what it is. It's religious racism. Now, what kind of sense does that make? That's why I wanted to discuss this a little bit more today. A few days ago, uh, I'm recording this video on January 23rd. By the time I posted it, it'll be a couple of days later. But January 21st is recognized in Brazil as the day that to combat religious intolerance. So that was a couple of days ago. And, every year on that date, you see a lot of studies and reports that come out talking about the experiences of people who worship in these religions. And it's always the same story. It's like no matter how many studies come out, the reports, it's like nothing ever gets done about it. And people who follow these religions are in constant fear of being attacked or assaulted of some sort. Um, people who are leaders in the houses of worship never know. They might wake up and go to their Tejeda one day, or they might be there, and all of a sudden somebody just sets it on fire. Somebody invades it and just starts, tearing up the place. It's amazing. It's really, you want to see one of the most hostile examples of what we'll call religious racism. You just look at the experiences of people who follow the Candomblé or the Umbanda religion. So let's get into this today. What is the reason for the persecution of the Afro-Brazilian religion of Candomblé? The attacks on Candomblé have grown by 270%, or they grew by 270% in the year 2022. This report that I got is from 2023. It was from January of last year, almost exactly a year ago. So I'm going to divide this video into part one and part two because it's a pretty long piece. So I'm, about halfway through this, I'm going to, you know, record the second part of this video and just invite you all to come check out part two, because this is an important, anybody who's interested in Brazil is something that you should know about. So let's just get into this story for today. January 21st, as I just said, is the day of combating religious intolerance in Brazil. The second thing that was going to come out in this article is the violence and prejudice against African origin religions. And three, as I said just a few minutes ago, the violence against Candomblé and Umbanda are just other examples of anti-Black, anti-African sentiments in Brazil. As I said, a country that has long said and promoted itself as a country that's free of racism or racial discrimination. And as they are African origin religions and the stereotypes that people believe about these religions, it comes out in violence. So let's get right into today's story. What is the reason for the persecution of Candomblé in Brazil? This is a story by Joana Brandão Tavares. It's actually from May of 2016. But regardless, I mean, okay, so this article is almost 8 years old, but it doesn't matter because it still applies, because this is still an urgent problem today all over Brazil. So Salvador in the Brazilian state of Bahia is the city of Candomblé, a religion with African origins, which is still a target of discrimination today. There are places of prayer that are sometimes invaded and destroyed. Now, remember, Salvador is considered the center of Black culture in Brazil. People who are really interested in Black cultural connections, Salvador is the city that you want to be in. It was the first city that I visited when I started going to Brazil in the year 2000. Okay. This is just a photo from a Candomblé ritual in Salvador, Bahia. The drums are heard as the poetry Vozes da África, or Voices of Africa, by the Black Brazilian poet Castro Alves, echoes the cry for help of African peoples for the end of slavery. God, oh God, where are you that you don't answer? In what world, in what star are you hiding, embedded in the skies? Slavery lasted 350 years in Brazil. 4 million men and women, now by some estimates, that's actually about 5 million Africans who were enslaved were brought to Brazil. I always have to point this out. Brazil got the vast majority of the enslaved Africans that got brought to the Americas. By the reports that we have, anywhere from 10 to 12 to maybe 15 times more Africans were sent to Brazil than in the United States. Of all the Africans that were brought to the Americas, including all of the countries in the America, North America, South America, and the Caribbean, 40% of all enslaved Africans were sent to Brazil. Okay, that's something I have to always keep pointing that out. So 4 or 5 million men and women were forcibly taken from Africa to be enslaved in Brazil. When they arrived, in addition to language, culture, and workforce, these people also took with them their faith. African beliefs and rituals originated religions such as Candomblé and Umbanda, currently practiced throughout the country. The buzz of conversations can be heard on Avenida Vasco da Gama, a busy area of the city of Salvador. In the valley and also up the alleys, embedded in the hills, are some of the oldest tejedos in the city. Now, tejedos are what they call the houses of worship, where people who follow Candomblé, this is what they call their houses of worship. This is where practitioners of the religion perform the rituals and liturgical celebrations. What is the liturgy of Candomblé, or how is it celebrated? Candomblé is estimated to have more than 3 million followers worldwide, mainly in Brazil. Now, I'm going to just say, it's been a known fact that the numbers of people who practice Candomblé in Brazil, we can never really know, because people often don't tell people that they practice Candomblé out of fear of people stereotyping them, of saying you're following the devil or you're into that witchcraft. So that's probably an extreme undercount. People who practice Candomblé, a lot of them won't even tell you that they do, because they are afraid of what the reaction might be. The other thing I want to point out in this picture is it's been long a question of why so many images that people use in Brazil are going to depict white people, white women, white men. The deity, the Orisha Iemanjá, is supposed to be the goddess of the sea, and she's of an African myth, come out of Nigeria. So then you see the statues representing Iemanjá in Brazil, and they suddenly become white, like this statue right here. See another video for that. I have a video where I talked about that a little bit more at length. So Africa was a liturgy in the Terreiro Casabranca, the oldest in Salvador, and possibly also in the country, which was founded by 3 African princesses, Iya Deta, Iya Kalae, and Iya Nosso, taken as slaves to Brazil. It was in 1823 that it all began. Who welcomes us? Now, this is the article from DW, the DW website. Who welcomes us is Pai Leo, or Leo, an Ogun of the house, who performs various functions in the terreiro, such as playing the drums and receiving visitors. Okay. Pai Leo says that his candomblé was initially located in the city's downtown. He says, due to speculation, progress, the Inquisition, the persecution of the Jesuits and Catholics, we were forced to move here, he explains. Here we worship several orishas, 16 orishas informs the Ogun. Now, these are the orishas. These are deities that have their own, we'll say, gestures. They have their own colors and what people believe they represent. I just spoke about Iemanjá, but although there are numerous, there are far more than 16 orishas. These are the 16. They follow these particular 16 um, in this particular Tejedo. Okay. There's a couple stories that I've done about the Orishas in previous articles where you can see how the Orishas that were originally of Nigerian background, but the myths that go behind the deities, you can match each one of those deities, or each one of those Orishas up with like Greek origin, of the gods and, Roman gods. It's like when you look at the characteristics of each of the Orishas, you can match them up with a Greek and a Roman similar figure. I got another a post on my blog that talks a little bit about that. It's really intriguing. You have to check it out sometime. The deities in the Candomblé of Ketu tradition are called Orishas. In the Terreiro, the one who spiritually guides the house is the Pai ou Mãe de Santo, meaning the priest or the priestess. In the large room, the ceiling is decorated with banners. A large crown representing Shango, the Orisha of justice, rests on the altar in the center. This is Shango, the Orisha of justice. They say the Senor da Justiça. Visitors settle into benches around the room. Everyone is attentive to the beginning of the ritual. The sons and daughters of the house, as those who were initiated in the Terreiro are called, are also present. Drums with chants announce the Shire, the first moment of the ritual when the Orishas are greeted. Then the music becomes more intense to call the deities. From that point, recording is not allowed. Now, I'll tell you, I've only been to one Candomblé ritual, and that was on my very first trip back in Salvador in August, September of 2000. That's the only time I've been to one. But I would definitely want to. I haven't had the time to go back. I mean, there's so many things that you can look into while you're in Brazil, and as much time as I've spent there, it's always my interest has always been pulled one place or another. But it was something that I definitely want to go back and check out again because it was something new. I was introduced to the Orishas when I first started studying Brazil in the book by Abadias do Nascimento, talking about Africans in Brazil, and it was my first introduction to this racial issue in Brazil, and Nascimento was one of Brazil's greatest like civil rights, human rights leaders of African descent. Let me see, where are we? Okay, the liturgy lasts until midnight with chants, drums, and dancing. A caruru is also served, food made with okra, shrimp, and palm oil, known in Bahia as terreiro food, due to its being very common in these rituals. So this is some of the food that you have to try this. I've had this. It's people often make this type of food and they're not even necessarily connected to the candomblé. But if you go to Salvador Bahia or any other part of Brazil, it's something you have to try some of this food. It's incredible. Okay, in the Terreiro of Mãe Conceição, on the outskirts of Salvador Bahia in São Gonçalo of the Cabula neighborhood, in the middle of the residential houses and some churches, is the Terreiro of Mãe Conceição, which means Mother Conceição. The children play candomblé music. You go down a staircase. We met with Mother Conceição and heard her sing. The song is a greeting to the entity Sultan of the Woods. Conceição is one of the well-known Caboclo house mothers of Salvador. Unlike the Orishas who have African ancestry, the Caboclos originate from Brazil. The first Africans who arrived were incorporated practices of indigenous origin into their rituals as a way of greeting the people who lived on these lands. So you see this interchange between the Africans brought to Brazil and the indigenous people who were already there. In these 25 years that I have been here, I always have something to do for the community, says Mãe Conceição, which is this lady right here. They call her Avó or Grandma Conceição. Most call her Avó Conceição, meaning Grandma Conceição. My Caboclo nation, my guides ask me to find the people in need and tell me to do things. I make munguzá here at the door. I make soup to give to people, she explains. The chair of Terreiro Mocambo. Okay. Anselmo Santos, he died. It's been a few years now. He was a Pai de Santos in the Mocambo Terreiro, which is located in the peripheral area of the city of Salvador. Santos explains that the Candomblé Terreiros were installed in the pockets of poverty. When it began, the Mocambo Terreiro was installed in the peripheries due to the need to have a pure environment, leaves and waters, which is why today the Terreiros are under siege. The city grew in surroundings, and then you fight for people's quality of life. You fight for fauna, for flora. We have been working in this sense to bring people in the community a better quality of life, reveals the Pai de Santo, again, the religious priest of the Candomblé. In October 2015, the chair where an ancient Pai de Santo of the ancestry of the house sat during the service was returned to the Mocambo Tejedo. The Tejedo went 95 years without the chair, which is a symbol of power and respectability in Candomblé. The chair was taken in 1920 by the police, who invaded the Tejedo to prevent a service from being held. These police operations were frequent at the time, as Catholicism was by law the official religion of Brazil, and all other religions were prohibited. So just in the last 10 years, they got back this chair. This chair was returned in 2015. Now, they talked about this period in the 1920s where, the persecution of people following Candomblé was the norm. That's why laws had to be passed to protect the people who practiced Candomblé or Umbanda, because they were cracking down. It was all like, in Brazil, religions of African origin were seen as witchcraft. The stereotype that people have when they hear the word voodoo in the United States, this is kind of how people look at Brazilian Candomblé and Umbanda. So they had to fight to get laws to put in place to protect their religions. And in this period, in that, the night starting like in the 1920s and arguably before that, police would regularly invade these tejedos, these houses of worship, and just confiscate the items that were considered important in the religion. So you had all types of sculptures and statues, and then you see this chair here that was confiscated by the police over 100 years ago. They only, they got it back in 2015, like 95 years later. So anyway, I want to talk a little bit about just some of the links that I have that back up what I'm talking about here. Like I said, at the Black Brazil Today blog, you'll see lots of articles where I'll just talk about the attacks on the Candomblé, the attacks on the Tejedos, the violence against the people that practice. Can you imagine if you're somebody who goes to church and you're constantly in fear of being attacked by somebody who doesn't like your religion? They constantly attack, they burn your church down, which we know has happened in the United States. But the religious intolerance against Afro-Brazilian religions in Brazil, again, the same way that I talk about, you can't compare the amount of police violence between Brazil and the United States. Brazil is a winner, hands down. The same thing is true when we talk about religions. This was a story that just came out a couple of days ago. Religious leader Babalori Shah denounces that his Tejedo was invaded 10 times in 8 years in the metropolitan region of Salvador Bahia. Okay. This is Pai Marcelo, and near his Tejedo. You punch up the word, I just use the keywords to look in Google, attacks against African origin religions, and you're going to get hundreds, if not thousands of them. Studies, let me see. A study shows that religions of African origin were the target of 91% of attacks in Rio de Janeiro in 2021. Let me see, what else can we see here? Sao Paulo registers an increase of religious intolerance in 2023. Again, the majority of attacks against religions in Brazil are against African origin religions. Let me see. Religious racism, again, that's what I said, they're calling it now. Religious racism continues strong and aggressive in Brazil, is this story here. Religious intolerance increases 45% in Brazil. Don't know what year that video is from. Let me look at this. Cases of attacks of religions of African origin increased by 270%. Let me see what else we have here. Let's just scroll. Afro-Brazilian religions suffer with violence. What else we have here? Hostility against cults of African origin are still on the increase. Persecution. Listen to this. Evangelical drug traffickers cause terror to African origin religions. It's crazy. Like I said, I say this often, like I could just create whole blogs dedicated to a certain issue. I could definitely create a whole blog just talking about religious racism in Brazil, because there's enough. You can punch up thousands of articles. Here's one from 2022. Racism is still a principal cause of religious intolerance in Brazil. Almost half of the tejedos of the country register at least 5 attacks in the last 2 years, shows a study. This is from another global Article study shows that religions of African origin were target of 91% of attacks in Rio in 2021. Religions of African origin are targets of 59% of the crimes of intolerance. Now, check, why is that a big deal? Listen to this. They're the target of 59% of cases of religious intolerance, but yet they represent 0.2% of the population of people who follow religion in the federal district in Brazil, the capital city of Brazil, Brasilia, DF they call it. They represent 0.2% of people who follow religion in the nation's capital. Less than 1%, a fifth of 1%, but yet they're 59% of the targets of religious intolerance in the country. Think about that for a minute. Here's another one. Let me see what the headline here says. Cases of attacks of religions of African origin grow by 270%. That's from last year, actually 1 year to the day. This is from January 23rd, 2023. I'm recording this video January 23rd, 2024. See what else we have here. If you were just to go through, like I said, the Black Brazil Today blog, you'll find they kill us in the name of Jesus. Followers of Candomblé religion detailed threats by Protestants and dope dealers for Jesus. The demolition of a Candomblé temple in Brasilia, which is one of the cities I was just talking about. In the state of Bahia, cases of intolerance against Afro-Brazilian religion have increased by 2,250%. Latest is attack on monuments symbolizing Black resistance to slavery. What else we have here? Here's a big one here. Afro-Brazilian religions win a court ruling against Record TV, one of the top 3 or 4 television networks in Brazil, for their demonization of people who follow these religions and possibly incited violent attacks on the houses of worship. Religious intolerance leads to the death of a 90-year-old priestess and the stoning in the head of an 11-year-old girl, both initiates of the Candomblé. Fanatical evangelicals accused in both incidents. Afro-Brazilian religious leaders' temple has suffered 8 violent attacks in 8 years. It's not religious intolerance, and it is indeed racism, says Baba, during a roundtable on violence against the sacred spaces of African origin religions like Candomblé, and it just goes on and on. These are some pictures. You can just punch it up in Google. I punched up Ataki Queimar Terreiro, which means to attack or to burn down terreiros. These are just some of the images that you get. People burn down these people's, religious temples. They invade and just start breaking stuff. These stories always make national headlines. Just look at the violence. Look at what this lady standing here just looking at the remains of what used to be her temple. So this is something that goes on all the time. This is why they needed a day to combat religious intolerance. This is what January 21st is all about. Okay, this is a story that I just said, one of the stories on the blog. Afro-Brazilian religions win court ruling against Record TV. Networks programs demonize adherents and possibly incited violent attacks on houses of worship, again called terreiros. Right? So let me see. As part of the ruling, Record TV had to present 16 hours of positive content about Afro-Brazilian religions. The courts felt that their demonization, particularly the owner of the Rede Record television network, is a vastly popular evangelical church leader, and that's his network. So he uses his network to not only, demonize Afro-Brazilian religions, but a lot of people say because of these reports and because of how people who follow evangelical religions react, they take out this animosity, this violence, this intolerance against these houses of worship of Afro-Brazilian. This is who I'm talking about. Rede Record TV network owner and founder of the Igreja Universal do Reino de Deus, meaning the Universal Church of the Kingdom of God. This is Edir Macedo. He's the owner of the Record TV television network and also this church, the Igreja Universal do Reino de Deus. Okay? So all of this is a sign against religious intolerance. So this is like a huge problem in Brazil. And that's why I wanted to talk about this today. Curious to know what your thoughts are. I'm going to end this. This is the end of part 1. I want you to, like this video, share this video, leave some comments in the comment section. Just if you're new to this this discussion of religious intolerance against Afro-Brazilian religions. Just tell me what you thought about this. Drop a comment in the comment section. Consider subscribing to this channel. Click on the notification bell so that you know when my next video comes up. With that said, I'm going to end this video here and invite you to come check out part 2 of this topic that I'm talking about.